Climate change activists were hoping to make a statement this week at a trial in Fall River, but instead they got an unexpected show of support from the Bristol County District Attorney. 2 environmental activists were facing criminal prosecution for using a lobster boat to block a coal shipment headed for Brayton Point Power Station in May 2013. The stunt landed them in jail for conspiracy, negligent operation of a motor vessel, and other charges. The activists were hoping the trial would publicize a novel defense that the threat of climate change is so dire that they were compelled to break the law. But then, an odd twist, Bristol DA Sam Sutter agreed with them.
Climate change is one of the gravest crises our planet has ever faced. In my humble opinion, the political leadership on this issue has been gravely lacking. I am heartened that we were able to forge an agreement that both parties were pleased with and that appeared to satisfy the police and those here in sympathy with the individuals who were charged. I am also extremely pleased that we were able to reach an agreement that symbolizes our commitment at the Bristol County District Attorney's Office to take a leadership role on this issue.
Amen.
Now, here to dive into the details of this case and the possible implications for climate change policy is WGBH News science editor Heather Goldstone. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Heather, this actually went a little bit under the radar for, I think, people in the Boston area until this happened. And we go, oh, what was that all about anyway? So just bring us up to speed.
Well, it goes back a few years, actually. I don't know if you remember the night that Hurricane Sandy was due to hit. There was actually kind of a big climate rally in Boston. And at that rally, Ken Ward and Jay O'Hara, 2 climate activists, met and were talking about things that they could do to try to make a difference. And what they decided to do was buy a lobster boat. And on May 15th of 2013, they drove it up to the dock at Brayton Point Power Station in Somerset and dropped a 200-pound anchor that actually was not just tied to the boat, it was actually chained to the keel of the boat, positioning themselves so that a barge carrying 40,000 tons of coal could not get in. It could actually dock, but couldn't deliver its coal. And they'd made themselves basically immovable. They were there for about 7 hours with Coast Guard and police trying to figure out how they were going to move them out of the way. And so essentially for a day, they made it impossible for coal to be delivered to the power plant.
And why Brayton Point? Well,
Brayton Point is the largest coal-burning power plant in New England. It's actually the largest fossil fuel burning. They also burn oil. And so one of the largest emitters of carbon dioxide in New England. And in particular, coal is one of the dirtiest fuels you could possibly use of all the different fossil fuels. And so Ward and O'Hara said, really what we need to do is we need to stop burning coal now. And they don't have the power to shut down Brayton Point completely, so they thought they would disrupt operations for a day.
What was the significance of the lobster boat? Did it have to do with just an environmental?
They said it was basically just a coincidence. It was a nice old wooden boat. They both appreciate wooden boats. Ward joked that he once had a recreational lobster license he never used, so maybe he'd get to use it now. But yeah, they weren't going for any symbolism regarding climate impacts on fisheries, but they said that was a nice coincidence once they realized it had happened. And there was also the huge disparity in size between a 32-foot lobster boat and this 40,000 tons of coal on this enormous barge.
So these 2 were facing serious criminal charges. They could have done jail time. Explain the connection with Bill McKibben, because that's one of the reasons why the DA Sutter sided with these guys. He started reading the same article that they had read, written by the environmentalist Bill McKibben. They go, wait a minute, this guy's right.
Yeah, basically, so what they had planned was they were going to trial for 4 criminal counts, conspiracy, marine vehicle violations. And they weren't going to deny any of it. They can't. They actually called the police to tell them they were there for a nonviolent protest. But what they were going to launch was something called a necessity defense, where they were going to argue that their illegal actions were made necessary by a lack of government action to prevent a greater harm, the impacts of climate change. And so it was kind of an attempt to put Obama and more broadly government policy on climate change on trial. And so they had Bill McKibben, the founder of 350.org, was going to be testifying, as was James Hansen, who's a former NASA climate scientist who has become a very vocal advocate on this issue, showing up to really create this public stunt almost in their trial. And instead, as you said, District Attorney Sam Sutter started looking into this and decided that, first of all, they were never going to make the legal bar for a necessity defense. It was unlikely that would actually make it to trial. It has not made it to trial in other cases where people have tried to do that. And yet he thought they're right. They shouldn't just be convicted for this. And so he brought forward a motion to drop the charges. They dropped the conspiracy charge. They downgraded the others to civil and simply said you need to pay $2,000 in restitution to the town of Somerset for the cost and the hassle of getting them out of the way.
But meanwhile, Brayton Point is still bringing coal in there. So, I mean, it's not like they've...
Right. They didn't shut it down. They interrupted operations for one day. Brayton Point is actually scheduled to shut down in 2017. The owners announced that earlier this year. So after this action, and in fact, the shutdown is not for environmental reasons, at least not directly. It's a financial issue that cheap natural gas is making it financially infeasible for other power plants, and that plus new regulations coming in on coal burning plants. They say it's just not feasible for them to keep operating. So they'll be shutting down in 2017. But in the meantime, the Ward and O'Hara are hoping that others will go out and disrupt operations in the meantime.
So I've never seen a DA do anything like this. It's kind of cool. I mean, but is it precedent setting? Is it like, I mean, he just kind of scuttled the whole thing.
Yeah, he totally scuttled. And actually the judge in court on Monday morning was kind of flabbergasted by the whole thing and kind of kept reiterating, you're sure you understand what's going on and this, you really intend to completely end this. This is your motion. You're sure this is what you want to do. And he says it doesn't set a precedent that would go beyond Bristol County or beyond extremely similar circumstances. But as I said, Ward and O'Hara says that opens the door for people to go and blockade Brayton Point.
And other plants and things, nuclear and otherwise. All right. Heather Goldstone, thanks as always.